Jesus more.
So, my dear friends, we continue to listen to the Eucharistic discourse that we find in John's Gospel, chapter 14, just after Jesus has washed the feet of the apostles in John chapter 13, and then he sits with them and gives them this very powerful message, knowing that his time is almost up. So today, Jesus makes a distinction between the peace that he gives, the peace that comes from God, and the peace of the world. He says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. Not as the world gives, do I give it to you." So, it's not the peace that we think about, the peace that we have when we feel that there are no problems, no issues, we don't have to go through, we are not going through stress, then we say that we are peaceful. That is not the peace Jesus talks about. It's not the absence of war. It's not saying the world peace, as we know, is absence of war, or I don't have anything that is getting me worried or worked up or frustrated, so I feel I'm at peace. And we know the worldly peace is temporal because now and then it fluctuates. So because now and then we have issues, and then the next moment we are okay, and then something comes up, somebody annoys you, and then the peace is gone, and then you feel you get reconciled and you get back, and then you get into a battle with somebody with your workmates or your classmates, and then the peace is taken away, and then you restore it again, and then something happens again. So since we are in the journey of life, we could get frustrated, we could get issues, we could get encounters with people that would take away our peace. Even our children could be very annoying at times, and then we feel peace is taken. We are having today the anniversary of Rhea and Anrem. I'm sure it's 25 years is not just smooth, right? There have been times of him taking your peace or you taking his peace, and then you feel, okay, can I still stay in this? So the worldly peace is something that fluctuates. It's not something that is permanent. But the peace that Jesus talks about today in the gospel is the peace that we have, is a gift of God, because it's one of the fruits of the Holy Spirit, according to Galatians chapter 3. One of the fruits of the Holy Spirit is peace. And this is the peace that Jesus gives to his apostles. Not the peace that is the absence of trouble or pain or difficulty, but the peace that we have in spite of all of this. The worldly peace cannot coexist with pain. The worldly peace cannot coexist with difficulties and challenges and frustrations. No. But the peace that God gives is a peace that we have in spite of whatever thing we are going through, that there is something that it gives us calm. Remember, worldly peace can also mean doing something wrong in order to just restore that. For instance, there are people who would have really big issues in their families, and then they say, okay, I'm going to drink. Okay? They get drunk so that they can forget and have some peace. Okay? That is worldly peace. Or some others would take drugs just to calm them down. Okay? I remember, I think I shared about that, about a boy who got into drugs because the pain of the memory of losing his parents, because his father shot his mother right in front of him and shot himself. So that memory of that is always haunting that boy, and it led him into drugs because drugs was the only way to find peace. Okay, and he got into drugs, and we got this story when they were explaining to us about the causes of addictions. And this boy, the only time he would find peace, the worldly peace, is when he took drugs. And then he could sleep and he could find some peace. So that is worldly peace. But the peace that Jesus gives us is the peace that we have in spite of what we go through. And a real demonstration of that is what we find in the first reading, that Paul is stoned to death, literally. And he's been persecuted and all that. And after he's stoned to death, he's thrown outside the cities, and the disciples gather around him and they pray. And through their prayer, he was able to stand up. And when he got up, he went back to preach. What is it that led him into that? And he would not hold anything against anybody, but he was preaching with love, with peace, with joy, and preaching in spite of the persecution that he was receiving. Think about Stephen. When Stephen was being stoned to death, he still said, "Into your Father, do not hold this sin against them," because he was at peace with God, because God had granted him that peace which the world cannot give us. If it's just about pain, then he's not peaceful. But the peace of God can coexist with pain. And therefore, it's a reminder for us, this is what we can ask of God, that he may grant us that peace that the world cannot give. And that is why immediately after the resurrection, when Jesus appeared to his apostles, the first gift he gave them was peace. He said to them, "Peace be with you." In John chapter 20, verse 19, he repeated that again just one verse after in verse 21. And then 4 verses after, he says in verse 26, "Peace be with you." So he said it 3 times to make us, to remind us of how important this peace of God is. So on this day, we continue to ask God to grant us peace, the peace which the world cannot give. We continue to pray in a special way for Rhea and Anrem, that God may continue to grant them this peace, love, and joy, especially in their marriage life.
Kiss us, mother, kiss your children. Bring God's blessings from above. With your mantle blue enfold us in your gentle holy love. See the darkness dissipating, hear the trumpet echoing, Satan's rage